Welcome to our new weekly podcast, Creative Happy Hour. I am Karena.
And I am Micah.
And we are happy to have you joining us today as we discuss Rosé. Cheers.
Cheers.
So, what does Rosé have to do with creativity and building your best creative life? That's what we're about to find out.
That's what we're going to find out.
Exactly. So here we go. So do you know much about the history of Rosé?
I don't. I'm curious to hear about it.
Okay, well, I'm going to kind of cover how it went from like this maligned, drink, this pink drink, and it got dragged back from the brink to become something that was actually kind of cool. I mean, I think that you might remember that it was definitely, Rosé had a very bad reputation for a while, but I'm going to take us through the whole history.
Yeah, kind of like me in high school, right?
Kind of like
that. I'm joking. It wasn't like that in high school.
That was college.
That was college. I get them confused all the time.
Which makes complete sense.
Too much rosé.
Too much rosé.
Yeah.
No, probably not. Probably not, because when we were in high school, rosé wasn't even a thing yet.
Wasn't even on the map.
Yes. So let's take that map and let's go over to ancient Greece, which is where we begin with our history of rosé. So rosé started there probably. It was one of the first wines, which is kind of interesting because we view it as this like new trendy thing.
Right.
But in fact, rosé was actually a blend of red and white grapes plus water because only barbarians drank straight wine. Which is fine with me.
Call me a barbarian.
Call me a barbarian. I don't mind. And so rosé was very popular. Even children drank it. It was like the first drink for everyone, which is kind of perfect that we're doing it for our first episode of the podcast.
Oh yeah, very.
So I thought it was a really good introduction. It's easy drinking. And that's why it was so popular, was that it was easy drinking, good for kids, good for women, good for pregnant, not pregnant, whatever. It was, definitely very accepted.
Everyone could drink it.
Everyone and anyone and everybody did. So then they took the rosé over to Marseille. So Marseille was a French shipping port, basically. And Marseille is close to Saint-Tropez, more or less, which is still kind of the epicenter of rosé today. So it's kind of interesting that it came over there, became very, very popular. And then it kind of hung out and was just, kind of varying degrees of popularity. But then started to kind of gain traction in the 19th century. Because later 19th century is when that whole leisure class, thing started happening. People see Sex and Sun, south of France, pétanque, tanning, swimming in the ocean, like that started to become
easy drinking.
Easy drinking. So the chilled rosé actually became very glamorous. Like that was kind of like, it meant vacation. And I think that to most like French people, rosé is still like,
It represents leisure,
totally,
hanging out on the beach.
Exactly. So, 19th century, things are looking pretty good for rosé. Like everything should have been fine. If that had continued on that, whole trajectory, I think that things would be very different. But what happens is American businessman in the 1940s, always an American businessman who ruins everything. He heads
only
to
takes one.
It only takes one. And this guy, I won't even name his name. First of all, I can't remember it. But secondly, he goes to Portugal. And he discovers in Portugal they have this very sweet wine that is a rosé wine. And is very popular because it's cheap. And it's, it's there. And it's just something that you drink. You don't question it, right? So he goes to Portugal and he thinks, this is going to do great in the American market. So what does he do? He renames it. And he chooses a name that is the name of like his favorite painting, which is a like Velázquez painting called Las Lanzas. It's right.
It's painful. It's painful. He should have just made it like a subset of Pepsi or something.
Right? Seriously, exactly.
He really like Pepsi by day,
like rosé
by night.
Yeah. So he couldn't even pronounce Las Lanzas, so he calls it Lancers. Which is, seriously, it's like, like lance me in the pancreas. So that's what he did. He brings it to the States, and does he put it in a cute little bottle with a nice little label. No, of course not. No. He puts it in this disgusting jug type situation, which certainly didn't do anything to like increase its whole, trend. Plus, it actually let all the air in. So this shit oxidized like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, it was disgusting. And so people started to think, my Lord, this stuff is terrible quality. It's like, factory made. And it's sweet, it's cheap, it's nasty. Who wants it? So he kind of ruined it for everyone. So by the time, like the 40s, they tried to rehabilitate it with all these ads. Like even Jimi Hendrix, I think, did an ad for Lancers, if I'm not mistaken. But somebody needs to look that up for us.
I mean, maybe that's what was the end of him. He was like, he had a couple Lancers and it was over.
That was it.
They think it was something else, but it could have been the Lancers. It could have been this nasty wine.
It's like, is it the drugs or is it the Lancers? That's the advertising.
No, I actually think that's a whole show. That's an actual whole show, entire show. No, I think that's yeah.
Right?
We have to. We really need to look.
We need to investigate. I think like what kills creativity. Is it Lancers?
Is it Lancers or is it something else?
So let's put Lancers behind us because I can't deal with it anymore. It's terrible. So no self-respecting sommelier in the States is going to even touch rosé, right? It's just not happening.
It's just not happening.
But meanwhile, like this whole time in the south of France, like rosé is actually super popular still. Like the Cannes Film Festival, that's all they're drinking. So it's still very glam. It's still got this Hollywood connotation, but only in France. And I think that part of what happened too, like in the 90s, I think you remember all the American wine dudes like Bob Parker and all these guys were talking about how the only real wine was like a big, strong cab.
Yeah, the California cab.
The California cabs.
Right.
They kind of effed up the whole wine industry for everybody else. But basically also they alienated all of these drinkers.
More subtle wines.
Exactly. So they alienated people who were like, is this what wine's supposed to be? What do I do with this? And that's when you got the rise of another famous pink drink. Can you guess what that is? In the 90s?
The Cosmo.
The Cosmo.
God knows I drank a couple of those.
There you go. So yeah, the Cosmo is almost a direct reaction of that whole
it's
red
like
wine thing.
Yeah, it's like cough syrup.
Yeah, it is. But that whole pink drink paves the way for this to come back in. Because people were looking.
Segue.
It is.
We all need a segue.
We all need a segue. We all need a segue in our story.
Yeah, what's our segue?
Exactly.
What's your segue?
What's your segue? So the Cosmopolitan paves the way for this next pink drink of champions. So so early 2000s, rosé gets introduced to key U.S. markets. And this was interesting. Which key U.S. markets it was? So I'm going to make you guess.
And this is where creativity comes into play because, clearly somebody needs to create a better story about this drink because the history of it is very sad and tragic.
It's crying.
But it's going to get a new story.
It's getting a new story. So where would you start a story if you were doing like a creative story? In the United States,
I would probably start in like Hollywood or something.
Okay, so there you go. Okay, so you got one. Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
Is one of the areas. Next area, think East Coast South.
The Hamptons.
Oh, well, East Coast North, the Hamptons. So that's number 2. You're 2 for 2. You're doing very well. And then the third one, South Beach in Miami.
Oh yeah, South Beach.
So when you think today,
I spent some time there.
Exactly, and when you think of like where are the artistic creative capitals of this country, those are your 3.
Those are epicenters.
Totally, like, and the Hamptons being that more vacation-y version of New York, right? So it's total like New York, LA with the South Beach thrown in for like the fabulosity, right? And South Beach was very trendy too at the time with like the whole Versace factor. So that happens, and that's kind of cool. Okay, we roll around to 2014. And in 2014...
you really sped up the clock.
I did. Well, no, because we're early 2000s.
Yeah.
2014, the Hamptons has a rosé shortage.
Oh, nothing like creating value. Just all of a sudden you can't get it.
Yeah, all of a sudden, where's the rosé? Where did it go? We have a rosé shortage. So, and they used to call rosé like the Gatorade of the Hamptons, and all of a sudden you can't get your rosé. So all these like basic, white girls who'd finally found their drink are like, what am I doing now? But that was,
get it.
I mean, I kind of feel like it was a story because this is also when Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, scarcity is a real phenomenon. Just create a little scarcity and then all of a sudden everybody wants it.
Exactly. So Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, Drew Barrymore makes a rosé. Hers didn't stick around so much.
Yeah, I don't think I had that one.
That comedian, the fat Jewish, he did white girl rosé.
Oh, yeah.
Which was kind of acknowledging, and this was really smart. Because he was like acknowledging that whole basic bitch connotation.
Yes.
And then turning it on his head because he's making it fun.
Right.
So like, and then this is where the story gets even more interesting because they start to make rosé really fun. So they start doing all these fun like brosé and frosé and rosé all day, you know.
Rosé all day. I
exactly,
like that one.
which very catchy, right?
It is.
And also
very creative.
Yes, and also they did Yes Way Rosé.
Yes.
Which I thought was very cute. They built a whole brand around Yes Way Rosé, and I think is brilliant. They did rosé gummy bears. Remember the rosé pool floats that you just couldn't get away, like, right?
Yes, you could not. I mean, it's like every time I was on Instagram, it was
okay. Exactly, you just said the magic word.
Yes,
because I think these days Instagram is what creates this whole
genres.
Yes, a whole genre. It absolutely did, and so like the hashtag rosé all day, 700,000 hits on that hashtag alone. Like wow. That's insane. Right?
Wow.
So people start, you know, all of their pictures are focusing on rosé. There's a whole thing called like Rosé Mansion or Rosé Manor in New York City, which is a whole building dedicated to rosé where you can take your Instagram pictures. Yeah, it's crazy.
Instagram has changed the landscape
completely
featuring your creative ideas.
Yes. So that part's super interesting. And so all of a sudden, rosé is a super cool thing. So then enter the new packaging and so you've got rosé in cans, which canned wine used to be like, are you kidding me? It was like boxed wine, which boxed rosé, also a thing.
It was a thing, but it wasn't a very glamorous thing.
No, but now it's like a fun thing.
Anything that you can, portable, glamorous, beautiful, delicious,
or just fun, like a popsicle of frosé, or a gummy bear of rosé, or a 40 of rosé. Like they're making these 40s, which
they make rosé 40s.
They do, yes.
Oh,
which is amazing.
We should be drinking one of those.
I know.
Right now.
Well, I mean, instead of 2 bottles, yeah, we totally should.
Yeah, a 40.
So, a 40, and then they came up with these really fun bottles, and you know, summer water and hogwash, and all these fun brands of rosé, which I'm totally behind. Like, I love that stuff. I think it's so much fun. I mean, I literally myself had a hat that said rosé all day, and I wore it with no shame. Like,
you should have had it on today.
I should have. I know.
Yeah. Where is that hat?
It befell a sad fate. Like, I think it had an early
somebody
end.
had too much rosé
in a swimming pool.
Yeah,
there's a swimming pool
in the swimming pool
and a flamingo pool float, because that's how basic I roll. So
yeah,
like,
I mean,
no shame.
you had to just
no shame whatsoever. So kind of
cliche.
Yeah, it's cliche all day.
Yeah, cliche all day.
So then kind of the conclusion of the rosé story is that now you have some of these original OG French brands. And first the rosé, 57% increase in sales in 2017 alone.
Okay.
In a market
if that doesn't make you want to be creative about about how your narrative is and your message and what you're trying to bring.
Yes.
I don't know what is.
Exactly. I mean, and that's something we're going to talk about like later, because that's major. That's kind of part of our whole lesson. This is why we're talking about rosé today.
We're talking about rosé.
I think it's rosé today.
Rosé today. Rosé today all day.
Right?
Every day.
So lest you think that rosé is all about cheap, funny, kind of kitschy, whatever. So all these old OG French brands have now circled completely back to do these heritage rosé brands where they have a very elegant bottle, very elegant package.
I love buying those.
Right? And they and you feel special about it, and they're kind of about history and
it's
quality.
almost like buying a beautiful bottle of perfume.
Exactly. Have you seen the one with the rose on the bottom of it? It's gorgeous. Like on the
bottom of the bottle.
Stunning.
I think you've brought that one to my house.
I think I did. Probably. Yes.
I was like, I'm going to save the bottle because it's so pretty.
It is so pretty. So again, that whole repackaging, repurposing, and making something like... It's so interesting the way that people have been able to kind of navigate that whole story and shape how it goes. So that's super inspiring, I think.
Oh, for sure. I mean, to make something that has a history like that beautiful, you're interacting with something that's beautiful and artful,
right?
And and fun to drink.
Yes.
It's an experience.
Completely. And it literally almost does make you forget that it had such a bad reputation before. So I think that it's just such an interesting thing to remind ourselves of. So I think that from here, I mean, we can pretty much go directly to how does that apply creatively? Like for those of us who are trying to promote our creative, you know, production or a creative life, or to start something new, like what can we learn from the whole Rosé story, the whole trajectory?
Well, the first thing that comes to me is creating a new story for yourself.
Totally. Like a new narrative, but not forgetting the past.
Not forgetting the past. Yeah. I mean, you have to know where you came from to know where you're going, and you have to be able to connect the dots.
Totally.
And
I mean, you were telling me something about the whole way that you're knitting and everything else kind of.
Yeah. I mean, when I learned to knit, you know, in my grandmother's time, it was utilitarian. It was utilitarian. You did it because you needed warm socks or you needed warm gloves, and you used, you know, there was a time where they used real wool, but then they used nasty acrylic, and it was just something that old ladies did.
Right, that's like the Las Lanzas or the Lancers of knitting.
Yeah, it was the Lancers of knitting. And now, you know, you can go to the farm and meet the sheep that you're, you know, learning how to dye their fibers, and you know, but even, you know, there's just so many fibers, and you can explore it in a modern context, and you can make fibers that are artful and you know, that are like living, moving, functional paintings. You know, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not incredible and like just the interactions that you can have with all. It's like the way the sommeliers and the entrepreneurs who are making the rosé were interacting.
Yes.
Like the way that you can interact with the people who are actually raising the animals that are providing the fibers, and then how they're treating them, and then the way other artists are working with it. And I mean, the fact that you have events it's a whole living thing.
Yeah, it's a living an artful life, or an artistic, creative life, and that it kind of flows into everything that you do.
Yes.
And it just makes your life more meaningful, more interesting, more colorful.
Well, speaking of colorful, so let's talk about your fiber frequencies, because you have, so we were talking about the rosé. We're talking about how it was repackaged to make it more appealing.
Yes.
So you've created a product which is in a new package in a way that is called fiber
frequencies. So
which is super marin, but also very, very cool. So can you explain like what that means to you? Like what's
well, so a fiber frequency to me is kind of getting a vibe or a frequency or a feeling from someone. And for me, oftentimes when I have an experience with someone, it comes to me in color.
Yeah.
With like synesthesia.
Yes. Exactly.
And so for me, it's one of the ways that I get that feeling about someone is through color.
That's how you express like what you're seeing and what you're feeling. Yeah.
So I noticed I started making these wild, you know, shawls and scarves and different, you know, bags and different things, items with fiber, and people would come up to me and they would say, I want that. I want it.
They would react.
They would have a reaction. They would have a physical reaction to it. And that was fascinating to me. I said there, you know, so I started to see a pattern.
Right.
That certain items that I made resonated almost like a frequency with people, certain people.
But I think also it's the format of what you did. Like you created a format, your fiber frequency, they're much more wearable and less fuddy-duddy than what the knitwear was before. There's a lot less of you're playing with these colors in this way that's kind of haphazard, but then it all goes together to make this package, make this whole.
It makes a concept, and it's this concept that is one of a kind, personal vibration.
Right. And also if I look at it, like you're not taking yourself too seriously. Like I look at your stitches, it's not like you're trying to do.
Oh no, I'm not doing fancy. No, I'm not doing fancy stitches. I'm simply riffing off a vibe or an experience that I get, or a feeling that I get.
It's much more direct. It's much more consumable.
It's very easy, kind of like Rosé. It's like easy going.
And that's what I learned when I started.
It doesn't have to be complicated or
highfalutin.
No.
Or over the top. Like when I started, you know, I've been writing my whole life, obviously. And I had this tremendous level of guilt because I would read things by other authors that I admired, and I'd be like, oh, well, this is not what I'm doing. It's not even actually what I enjoy writing. I enjoy getting the story out there, and in fact, having humor, which the Rosé thing actually depended very much on humor as well. And I found that when I started feeling less guilty about doing something simple but consumable, that's when I was able to start, producing. And then also doing that kind of opened up my whole work to other partnerships. Like if I was super, super high, concept, then that wasn't giving me access to the whole, you wouldn't be a bestseller necessarily by being super high concept, or like I wouldn't be able to sell, a TV script by being ultra artsy, though now I find that those things are kind of moving towards that direction a little bit more. But like where I actually started finding the success was when I was like, okay, let me get over myself. It's not that serious. Like, let's entertain people and let's get the story out there. And so I think that was kind of a cool shift.
And if it's a good story, and you can use a period properly, then it's accessible to people. Then then people want it, and it gets consumed, and they can experience it.
Yeah, and that's quality in and of itself. Like with Rosé, what happened is that even though it's like kind of inexpensive, great, we're having like police in our neighborhood. That's okay. It's a live podcast, you guys. But what happened with Rosé is that even though it used to be all cheap and everything, but it's hardly overly simple, because some of these Rosé producers started priding themselves on making it very predictable, which is super scientific and
consistent.
Consistent. And that's where they start to get the fans. That's where people, like, when people want a fiber frequency, they expect a certain story from you. Right? They expect a certain flavor. Like, it doesn't always have to look the same. It won't. Like that, you don't want it to look exactly, but you do want the same feeling,
Yes, you want to create the same kind of consistent, this is a fiber frequency, this is what it does, it's recognizable.
Yes.
But it's unique to every person that experiences it. The most recent one that I made was for the mosaic artist that, he saw one of my fiber frequencies on a friend of mine and, had that reaction and said, oh, do you think she'd make one for me?
Yeah, you hadn't even met him.
And I've never met this person. Yeah. I saw a picture of him and I was told that he likes the color green. But when I was thinking about this person and his photo and just kind of downloading his fiber frequency. I was getting blue and copper, and it was so interesting to me because I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
It just
I think the fact that you didn't even pause to worry about what that meant.
I don't even care what it means.
That's the beauty of it. Like if you're drinking your rosé, like I think that very rarely do we actually drink a rosé and go, oh, I'm getting notes of this and it means that. Like we don't actually care. So when we're tasting that rosé, as long as we're saying like this is tasty and I'm having that experience of enjoying it, I think that that's all that we really require. It does have that depth if we need to be like, ooh, this has, whatever type of fruit and whatever notes, you definitely can do that, but I don't think that's the point.
Well, I definitely think there are times where, you want something more dry. You want something more sweet. You want something more floral. You want something more, and so you can have times where you're craving a certain flavor.
Yes.
With everything. I want to read a mystery.
Exactly.
I want to read,
that's where genres come in.
I want to read a romance.
Yes. And like you can be into fiber arts, but there's a time when you're going to want a fiber frequency. And then there's another time when you're going to want some kind of vintage Farrell sweater that some grandma took 20 years to knit. And that's just a different flavor profile, I guess we'd call it. But it also has just as much value, really, at the end of the day. And I think that that's interesting. And then, when it comes to packaging as well, like I think you were talking about what you were going to do as a label. And I think that just even the label, like if you do something that's really incredible, that kind of ups your experience of it, right?
I think about the label all the time. I want them to be personalized somehow, but I also want to have a consistent label that
is recognizable and that people know,
that it's a fiber frequency, but that
exactly
I want to personally reach out to whoever I'm creating it for and let them know the process.
Yes, the process, and I think the process is really cool, and that's what I'm really liking about in terms of the packaging and the process and all of that. I'm loving the fact that entertainment and the arts, like especially writing and all of that, we're now getting onto these like entertainment verticals where you've got the book, the TV show, the movie, the video game, and then maybe the podcast, maybe the audiobook. And I think that that's so incredible because you get these different packages that kind of make it accessible in different ways to different people. And even, I mean, for us with this video podcast, like we're making it so it can be consumed in multiple ways. And
sure, you can listen to it or you can watch it.
Exactly. And you can listen to it all at once or you can break it into pieces. And then we're going to have it on different, places that you can, actually consume that. And I think that that's the way forward. And also, speaking of our podcast, like, I think it's all about with the Rosé, it was these new partnerships, and these new, and for us, like, for creatives, finding a new partnership with somebody else, I think opens you to new creative possibilities and to kind of expand on what you're doing already.
Well, yeah, and having real communities, not just social media communities.
Right.
I do think that allows us to reach more people.
Totally. And then with the Rosé, that's what happened when they actually went to the Hamptons, they went to South Beach, they went to Beverly Hills. Like those were communities. And I think that that was like a grassroots, real life thing. Where
they're both important. They're both important.
You
can't have one and not have the other. They both have to be there for the whole life of your creative work to exist. They both have to be there.
Yeah, but but when that all comes together, it's a beautiful thing. And I think that that's totally what happened with Rosé, and that's totally what we think needs to happen with any kind of creative production. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So the last part of the whole Rosé equation was that really hyper trendiness that happened. And I think that that's something that we're torn as creatives, because as creatives, we're like, oh, do I succumb to trends? Do I want to, work with a trend? And for me, I think I'm starting to see that I need to be open to the trends, and I need to see trends as an opportunity to maybe expand in a different direction. And I mean, you don't want to be a slave to it. What do you think of that whole?
I think that, I think about like there was a time where like people were writing their memoirs, and it's still kind of, it's still a thing that's like everyone's writing their memoir, right?
Yes.
And I have to be honest, I love reading memoirs. They're these personal, I'm very social and I like to be intimate with, I like to know about people. And so
I think a memoir almost isn't a trend. It's almost like, seriously, The Real Housewives is almost like it goes into that same trend.
But it's a trend. But it's a trend. But if you do it successfully and you become elevated as a writer because your memoir resonates with a lot of people, then it gives you this successful moment in time to be, you all of a sudden have these credentials as a writer or whatever it is that you're doing, and then you have a platform that you can launch into other things.
Exactly.
It gives you this,
following the trend can elevate your platform because it'll get you like into that, audience that you're seeking, or at least an audience that you're going to get.
But if you're only doing a trend, then it's not going to be sustainable ultimately.
No.
And you do want your craft to grow and evolve and become and have some longevity.
Totally. But I think you have to also not be afraid to pivot just a little bit. Like,
sure.
Just because you've been working on something or doing something or known for something, I think there is a way of pivoting but staying true to yourself.
Sure.
Which I think happened with the Rosé. I mean, they essentially stayed true to themselves. And when you look at the luxury iterations, you're like, well, at the end of the day, these are people who were working on this in the background all the time. And I think they had like sidelines that were trend driven, but they had that whole bottom line, was still kind of a constant.
Sure. It was grounded in a historical legacy. It was, Rosé was Rosé. I mean, it didn't, and it's the same with knitting. I mean, all the stitches are the same.
They're still the same.
We're not doing, there's different, you can organize stitches in a different way. However, you can knit and you can purl, and it's all the same. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're like you said, packaging it differently.
Totally. And also, but if you'd be blind to the trends, like that whole, I mean, I remember in terms of fibers, there was that whole llama trend, which is it still going on? I don't even know. Like there was that llama trend, and if you didn't take advantage of that llama trend, you maybe weren't reaching some of the audience that you could have. Now it's your choice whether you choose to go into that trend, and with literature it's the same thing, like the frickin' vampire obsession trend. drove me crazy because it was just over the top. Like, you know, once or twice
everything,
you're like,
and I'm not even into it, and everything was vampires.
I'm so not into it. And that's where, but at the same time, fan fiction has become this enormous trend where you're like, okay, I see where some people who would never have had an audience because of fan fiction, all of a sudden they're having one. But now how can they work with that yet not lose themselves? Like, that's what I think is the important thing. How do you not lose yourself as you follow this trend and as you pivot to try to answer that demand that people have? You know, because as a creative, you want to keep creating. And so if there's a demand, like, that's a reason to create beyond your imperative that you're having because you're a creative, and it's this thing that feeds you, as you were telling me earlier. You were talking about how, like, it's this thing that you kind of do and give, and it, you know, nourishes you, right?
It does. It gives back to you. You know, some things don't get back to you, but when I'm creative, it is this renewable source. And the trends, I kind of feel like you have to be honest about where you stand with a trend. I think that you have to, you know, does it feel good? You have to trust your gut on that. You know, there's certain fashion trends that I'm just, oh, I love this. I loved, you know, the wedged heel.
Because, right. Oh my God.
Because
I actually love that too. It was comfortable and it was cute.
Comfortable and it was cute. And I'm not very tall, so I could wear a little heel that I could cruise around. So, you know, it's sometimes the trend actually is good for you.
Yes. And it works for you and you adopt it.
It works for you. And then
but
sometimes
then if you adopt it for too long, then you start to kind of be lost in the past. So I guess you have to just see. And in fact, that is a great segue for our next section. Each week, we're going to have our section, which you saw me refill the glasses a second ago. It's going to be a section that we're calling Glass Half Empty, Glass Half Full.
I love this section.
Right? So each week, as creatives, we experience, you know, we're going to read about something or hear about something or think about something that's on a creative matter. And it's going to raise some thoughts in our mind of, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What do we think about this? And so we're calling it Glass Half Empty, Glass Half Full. And for this week, I chose mine completely on theme. I chose Millennial Pink. Millennial Pink.
It's
right.
It's a juicy one.
It's a juicy subject.
It's a juicy steak.
So, right. I mean, Millennial Pink, I think, is so omnipresent. I mean, you just can't like avoid it.
Can't escape it.
You cannot escape it. So I actually went and I looked at the history of Millennial Pink because it kind of drives me crazy. Like, in a way, it's kind of the anti-neutral. Like, I felt like, you know, that whole restoration and hardwarization of everything that happened a few years ago where everything was grayish. Like, I just couldn't stand that anymore. I was done. So, like, Millennial Pink seemed like an antidote to that.
Yeah, it was. It was.
But damn, like, we need to find something else, maybe? I mean...
It was an extreme opposite.
It was an extreme opposite. So, I tried to trace kind of how the history of pink and Millennial Pink. It's really interesting how pink used to be a boy's color. Like, baby boys wore pink.
Oh.
And somebody said this was the best. They're like, yes, because the outlook for baby boys was significantly rosier than for baby girls. So baby girls would wear blue. And I was like, that's cute. And then at some point...
That's kind of creepy, but...
Right? I know. But at some point, it switched with, like, Hollywood starlets, like Marilyn Monroe wearing pink. First ladies wore pink. Kennedy wore pink.
Very much so.
But even at the assassination, like, that was a very, you know, like, it's terrible,
pink
but it was so iconic.
Blood.
Yeah, it was so iconic. Exactly. So it had that edginess. And then you had Barbie. You had,
Barbie.
Right? Then you had... Elle Woods from what's that silly movie, the Legally Blonde.
Oh, we also had Pretty in Pink.
Pretty in Pink, Mean Girls with On Wednesdays We Were Pink. I mean, so pink. So then you start accelerating. I mean, the pink just...
It was a statement.
It was a statement, and then it blows up, like, even more. So you have, I think, for me, where I think, like, Acne, the brand started making their bags, I think this was, like, in 2007 or something, in pink. 2000 something, so Wes Anderson, I think. 2014, Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh,
that's like
very
peak pink.
very
right.
Yes.
Peak pink, like all of a sudden quintessential. And then there's the whole hashtag of, you know, unintentionally Wes Anderson, which was, you know, peaking for a while. And so that was anything that was symmetrical and pink.
And then we had the pink pussy hats.
Pink pussy hats. Exactly. Drake had his video with the pink, I can't remember what it was called, but a whole.
And then there was pink champagne.
Remember
pink champagne.
Yes. And then Apple started making the rose gold.
Oh,
iPhones and everything else.
Yes.
And then Rosé all day. 2014, same year as Wes Anderson, Grand Budapest Hotel, which was pink, is the rosé shortage in the Hamptons. Coincidence or something else, right? So you have all this, and then you have all the rosé stuff enters into the whole pink thing. Pantone names pink quartz, which was essentially a millennial pink. And millennial
there's
pink
even a singer pink.
And there's even a singer pink. Kate Moss had pink hair for time. Like everything started going together. Millennial pink's a little different because it's not a blue tone pink, so it's kind of a more palatable pink. But then the thing that started kind of annoying me is that then basically everything became millennial pink, like from a pinky beige to, you know, like a pink was like, oh, it's millennial pink. Like Urban Outfitters was just a sea of pink, you know, and I was reading a percentage of like the percentage of stuff that's actually colorful that's sold versus black or gray or whatever.
Oh.
And it's tiny, but like when you go into certain shops or if you go on Instagram, you feel like it's the majority.
Yeah. Sure. And again, it's framing the issue. You know, pink got the frame.
It got the frame.
And so
it's so photogenic, right?
It really is.
It's super photogenic. And I think it made people who weren't creative or who weren't visual, like I think it was like that easy, just like Rosé is like that entrance level drink. I think pink was the entry level color.
And it's considered feminine. I mean, I know
but then it went towards that whole gender neutrality because by adding the beigey tones.
But it's not intrusive in the way. It's not what I'm making the distinction of is we think masculine is more intrusive, it's more violent, more you know, I'm not making, you know, assumptions about any certain male person, if you identify that way. However, it is culturally it's not a threatening color,
right? But that's what we think. Like I think that when it used to be a more masculine color, you know, back in the day when like little boys would wear pink and aristocrats would wear pink and all this stuff, and even in India where like, you know, pink is such a, I wonder, does it have different connotations? Like now we've globalized this version of pink and we've got dudes wearing pink sweatshirts and tracksuits and, you know, I'm just wondering like, where do we go next from here? Like, I just feel like it's just too much. It's all over the place. And it kind of annoys me because I feel like now it just has taken the place of any originality.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's on its way out.
So glass half empty. Is that what
it's a glass half empty on that one?
I think it is. Because at first I was like, it's a glass half full because it enabled, you know, the creativity and it enabled this rallying. And it's actually like a visual language. Like I think that like that pink kind of created this visual language that people could agree on.
Sure. I think that color, I think I was saying that earlier, is that color is a way to communicate. It's a jumping off point. But then it says a lot without saying a lot, which that's the part that I have trouble with is there's not enough depth and to hold it up.
Yeah, and you'll find also like so much of the millennial pink, like on Instagram, it's going to be a millennial pink backdrop, right? It's like a backdrop, and then you've got text on top of it,
right?
Or other things like it's a background, it's a liner, it's a package. And I feel like it's not really standalone anymore at this point. I feel like it's become this accessory to the crime. And I'm not up for it anymore. I want an alternative.
I think it's half empty.
I think it's half empty. So viewers, we want you guys to tell us what's the next millennial pink, and let's keep it from becoming so big that it, you know, outlives its, you know, usefulness or its coolness.
Sure. And if you love millennial pink, we want to know why.
We do want to know
why. We want
to
hear your reasons.
We want to punch you in the face. No, I'm just kidding. We do not want to do that. Okay.
We want to fill up your glass and have a real conversation with you about it.
Exactly. We can have a civilized conversation over a glass of rosé since you obviously love the pink. You can type us your message on your like pink gold, you know,
rose gold phone with your pink sweater
and your nail polish, and yes, exactly. So okay, you had a really good glass half full, or was it? I don't know.
Well, so mine my creative exploration this week was I was talking to a patient who...
because we've never told people what we do.
I am a registered dental assistant by day.
She sucks.
I suck spit all day.
And
every day,
yeah, and I am an interior designer as my side hustle, I guess you'd call it.
Sure.
So this week I was researching toilets. It was very glamorous. And I also, as you guys may know if you found us through Spalmorum, am creating a awesome revolutionary writers community and platform that I think is going to change the way that we actually create and consume written material.
I love it.
Right? Love it.
Oh,
love it. It's the way forward. But yeah, so you were talking to a patient who's a doctor.
So I was talking to a patient who happened to also be a physician, and kind of an old school physician, happens to be married to a painter. Very well known in the community.
Very cool.
Yes, we'll get into that later. But so we're having this conversation. We were talking about global warming. Does it exist? Doesn't it exist? And basically what it came down to for me was whether it, he was saying it's very complicated with the, geologic time and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, weather's still messed up. Let's just...
And so I think, it doesn't matter to me. Whether it exists or not, I want to live in a world that's beautiful, that we take care of, that we clean up our garbage, we don't pollute it.
I know, whether it's happening or not.
I want to breathe clean air, period. While I'm here, I want to breathe clean air.
I don't want to live in a trashy.
I don't. I really don't want to live in a dump.
I mean, maybe it's not even the question.
So, so again, it's like, why do we do things? Do we do things because, because everyone's trying to create some kind of story that someone's against or they agree with? No, you want to do something because it's the right thing to do. And so
that's something where they're using the narrative kind of against doing the right thing. And
sure, I don't want to do the right. I want to have excuses to not do the right thing because it's not true.
Yeah, no.
And so that anyway, I don't believe it. And so we started talking about kind of the philosophical reasons behind why you do something, and then he said, "Oh, well, I really think you should read this book called The Lives of a Cell."
Very cool. Yeah.
And it is written by
Lewis
Thomas. And it was actually, I got the book because my patient he said, "Oh, I absolutely think you need to read this book. It's a fascinating story about, what we knew about the cell back, nearly 50 years ago. And a lot of the things that we theorized that we knew and we were thinking about and theorizing, they're actually, not only are they true, but they're even more magnificent than we even knew."
Incredible. You were telling me it was very poetic.
And so the book is very lyrical and it's poetic, and it's written almost like a poetic manifesto of this biologist who is observing the life of a cell. Or the lives of the cell, actually. He's arguing that cells have multiple lives, not just, they don't just do this one thing, and that we're very interconnected. And that was really the first time that they started to talk about philosophically how, the cell represents the really small part of ourselves that is really, this... kind of like the small version of
the universe.
Essentially.
Yes.
And so
I watched a documentary about that. That was fascinating. But I mean, it was nothing that I hadn't observed, but I just think it's so interesting to see how everything's interconnected. And I think that the creativity part of our life really feeds into that. I mean, I think it's so crucial.
Oh, just to think of science not as just like this boring, hard, evidence-based, that it really, there's an art to it. There's an artful way to look at it and to think of a biologist writing a book that is like a poem or a lyrical poem is just, you see, I think in what we were talking about earlier is that the creative life is not just for creatives. It's crucial. It's crucial and important to even, scientific discovery, that you have to imagine how these things are in order to see how they are.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. That's so cool. The part of the imagination or of, kind of projecting to be able to understand things is like absolutely amazing. So that's definitely a glass half full.
So glass half full.
The
Lives of a Cell.
The Lives of a Cell.
And it was published, Lewis Thomas. It was published the year I was born, which was even more kind of weird little synchronicity. It was like, oh, it's almost 45 years old, but
it's so modern at the same time.
It is. It's still relevant. It's still relevant.
Love that. That is so cool. And I think that makes a good segue for our next portion. Every week as well, not only are we going to give you a history of our drinks and a history of our concepts and a whole, explanation of our whole creative analogy, but we're going to give you actual usable homework, if you will, kind of actual blueprints and advice for how to motivate and how to make your next creative chapter, how to kind of push forward your best creative life, right? So this week we were going to explain actually why we're doing all of this and then give you a tiny little assignment, right? So when we talk about creativity, first our name, Creative Happy Hour. What were you thinking when we came up with this name? What was your thought for why it worked so well?
I think it works beautifully because creative happy hour to me it's that time of day where you're transitioning from doing what you want, what you have to do to doing, being reflective about what you want to do. You become a little bit more vulnerable. Maybe you have a drink, you meet up with friends, you hang out with the people that you want to hang out with, not just people you have to hang out with at work. You start to, you kind of blow off.
You loosen up.
You're obligatory things
to those possibilities.
Yes,
that
and all of a
come
sudden
later in the night.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely happy hour, and there's something about happy,
Yeah, and happy
it's happy hour, but you have to be happy, which I think that's so important. Like when you're, part of success is kind of creating happiness for yourself, and I think as a creative, like you are in so much more control of your own happiness. And so for me, I was thinking about the whole creative part. And I think that people might be listening to us and thinking, oh, creative, they mean artsy fartsy. They mean makers and crafters. And that's totally not what we mean. I mean, yes, we also do.
We do those things.
That is us. But I think that there's this connotation that like creative means not real and not serious and it's loosey-goosey. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, creating doesn't mean making. It actually means growing. And I think,
that's beautiful.
Right? Isn't that gorgeous? I think that, we all know that so many Silicon Valley companies right now are hiring creatives because they cannot do that exponential growth that they need to do to stay relevant without the creative, thinking, without the creative connections that, people like us can make on their team. And people who are creative are like implicitly collaborative. And they're always looking for the next thing. They're always looking for, how do I put these things together? How do I make this work better? How do I streamline this process? And so I think that that's why for us, like creativity is crucial. And also in the part where we are in life, like you talked about happy hour, where you're like migrating from that thing that you had to do and the kind of work a day thing. And I think we're all getting to that point in life where what was working up until this point, we see that there's an end in sight. We see that a transition is coming. And so I think that we're at that happy hour moment, right?
We're at that, it's metaphoric. In that, happy hour is a designated time. I like that you carve out
that time.
This designated time that it has a beginning and it has an end.
And it has a purpose.
Yes. And it's designated for simply that. And that is something I think, I know as a mom, as a working mom, as a single working mom,
just keep adding that.
Yeah,
on top of the other.
I could find every excuse in the book to I can't do that. I don't have time. I can't, and it's absolutely essential to my well-being to carve out
and a
happy hour.
Right. And an hour is just such a workable chunk of time. And also I think that, we kind of joke about the drinking, how we're like, oh, drinking, yay, cheers, woo. But really, I think that the alcohol portion of it, that whole getting drunk on the creative possibilities, that whole loosening up and allowing yourself to think of something different, maybe a little crazy, I think that is really imperative. And I mean, some people will get drunk on running, or they'll get drunk on something else.
And that's a different podcast.
Totally. That's a different podcast. If that's you, that's not necessarily us. I mean,
we're not going to go for a run.
We're not. We're open to hearing about it. We'd love to hear about your run. We're not doing that. But I think that's what this is. I mean, like, having the drink is very symbolic, and it's being, together and having that community, and those community bonds are built faster when you're a little trashed.
When you're a little lubricated.
A little lubricated. And I mean, it's true. You have these conversations that maybe if you weren't a little drunk, a little tipsy,
you wouldn't let your guard down.
You would not let your guard down, and you wouldn't, you make these new best friends the next bar stool over, or you come up with these like brilliant things that you can't remember in the morning, but that is so meaningful.
Write it down.
Write it down.
When you are at the bar stool, write it down.
That is so true.
Write it down.
Like, the biggest lie I have ever told myself is I'll remember that in the morning.
Oh.
I never freaking do.
You don't remember
And
it.
I'm always like, oh my God, that was so genius. Like, whether it's something I came up with at the bar, or whether it's a dream that I had, or it's a thought that I had while I was doing something else. Now, I mean, I've got a notebook with me, like, literally, here's a notebook. Like,
write it down.
Write it down. It's
In
crucial.
fact, I mean, I would love to hear what you guys come up with.
Write it down. Yeah.
At the happy hour.
Yes.
You write it down that you're not going to remember tomorrow, but you wrote it down, so then
now you're happy. So,
and now you're happy because you're just like, whoa, I thought of this.
I thought of that. Brilliant. Yes. So if you guys have something like that, we'd love for you guys to share it below in the comments, because we'd like to share that with other people. Like, I think that it's kind of these genius little snippets that eventually grow into something. So speaking of homework that we had for everybody too, we wanted to talk about that whole difference between just talking about stuff and having these wonderful ideas. And as creatives, we have nonstop ideas all the time. We're always like, oh my God, I have this great idea. I hope nobody steals it. Well, guess what? If somebody steals your idea and they actually run with it and you don't, like, tough poo-poo for you.
You're dumb.
You're dumb. Seriously. So
you gave it away.
You gave it away, and you weren't going to do anything about it anyway. So I think that the big, like, we have creative, but then we have, like, we're building our next creative chapter. Like, what's the difference? Is execution.
It is.
And that's absolutely major. Like, what's the difference between wanting to do something and success? Is that success is literally a measurable achievement, right? And that doesn't mean that, like, you had to make money on it. It doesn't mean you had to have this amazing audience for it. It's literally that you took that first step.
Took action.
You took action.
You did one thing to move forward.
Yes.
You made the phone call.
Yes.
You know, I don't know. Give me another example.
You
you actually wrote. If you're a writer,
Well,
you didn't just talk about being a writer. You actually wrote
something. I mean, whether it's a paragraph or a page, or
you wrote. Did I write today? Not did you write anything good?
No.
Did you write today?
Did you write something? It doesn't matter.
Did you? If you're a painter, did you paint today?
Did you paint today? Because that's the definition. A writer is somebody who writes. A painter is somebody who paints.
These aren't abstract
They're not. They're concrete concepts.
They are.
And I think that's another thing that doesn't serve creatives.
That's why we get a bad rap.
We get a bad rap because people are like, oh, it's happening in the abstract. Mm-hmm. And while that may be true somewhere, it's not worth shit if you don't actually apply it to something. So that's your homework for this week, you guys. We want to know that you applied something. So for us, it was this podcast. Like, we've been talking about it. We did it.
We've been talking about doing this.
To that. We've been talking about it forever. And this is the first chapter of it. Maybe we sucked, but you know what? We're going to get better next week, so you have to watch.
I mean, I suck all day at work anyway. I mean,
that's
my
your job. It's your job.
So I'm really, really good at sucking.
Exactly. And,
that's going to get edited out.
It's not. I'm not going to do it. So I'm really good at editing and not editing the things I don't want to edit.
I mean, it should be edited.
We each have our roles. So yeah, guys, we want to see you execute on something because that's going to be so valuable to you. Just one thing.
Make the phone call. Make the connection.
I mean, a phone call. For me, a phone call is really hard to make sometimes. But now we have email.
Make the art date. Make the date. We're going to get together and we're going to talk about it. And I mean, that's how you and I started this.
Exactly.
What, a month ago?
Yeah, exactly.
We just started to talk about the ideas, write them down.
But look how fast it goes.
And then distill.
Exactly.
And then film.
Because you think your ideas are genius at first. That's the beauty of writing it down too, is you think it's genius. Then you read it, you're like, there's a seed of genius here.
And it doesn't always work out.
Right. You have to kind of edit that down into what's actually good. And that's part of the creative process as well. Like there's no shame of it. I mean, full disclosure, we recorded a couple of versions of this. And we agreed that
there was broken glass.
There was shattered glass. There were a lot of things going on.
There was way too much makeup.
There was a lot of makeup.
There was a lot of makeup. I mean, a lot.
Yes, but now we feel that we've kind of gotten to something that is going to work enough that we can run with it this time, and then next time we'll see. So next time I'm super excited because you have chosen our cocktail.
Yes,
which
the
is
Negroni.
The Negroni, which
has a long
and rich history.
Yes,
and so symbolic. We can come up with tons of concepts.
It's just it's a super intense drink, and I love intensity.
Well, that's it, you guys, for Creative Happy Hour. We thank you so much for joining us and getting drunk on the creative possibilities with us. Cheers to you.
Cheers.